Happy Wednesday and welcome to the Charles Freedman radio program. That's right, once more it's time for news talk from 9 to noon, so pour that second cup of coffee and settle back for the program. I'm hoping that you'll be more than just a listener, be an active participant. I'd love to hear from you. 831-265-5050 is the telephone number, 831-265-5050. Remember, when you make that call, you'll be the top priority. We'll get you right on the air. And secondly, you are extended the privilege of being able to choose what you want to talk about. That's right. Don't feel limited by the topics I've raised. Raise your own. If you think it's interesting, by golly, maybe it just is. Today, I pick up my newspaper. Both of them have the same front page story today. This is unusual. Normally, the Hearst Press doesn't bother with any important national news for the front page. They have things about somebody's wash falling off the line, or mountain lions, or plastic recycling startups. And no, I didn't make those up. But this time, both the Journal and the Chronicle have a story about a federal judge saying that President Trump's use of National Guard troops in Los Angeles wasn't legal. Now, I admit the opinion was written by Judge Charles Breyer, who is a very politically oriented judge, and would probably rule that if Donald Trump were to brush his teeth, he were somehow violating the constitutional rights of bacteria in his mouth. But nevertheless, there is something real here. The United States of America, under our Constitution, has never been a country where the federal government sends troops into our cities and into our streets. This doesn't happen, except in cases of emergencies. If there's a riot, or if some crazy Arab blows up the World Trade Center or something like that, yeah, you get the National Guard, and pronto. But for purposes of maintaining regular order on a day-to-day basis, this is not the job of the federal government. And indeed, Congress passed an act called the Posse Comitatus Act. And this was a few weeks ago, 1878 to be exact. I remember thinking, well, this is a fairly good idea. It restricts the use of U.S. armed forces on the country's streets. Specifically says that this is not supposed to happen. Now, we have several things going on in this country right now that are not supposed to happen. The first one, of course, is an explosion of crime, particularly in our cities. Particularly in cities run by Democrat leftists who have somehow come to the conclusion that incarcerating criminals is not a good idea. I've seen presentations by Mayor Brandon Johnson of Chicago that were laughable. The man says that, we've tried locking up criminals. That doesn't work. What a ludicrous statement. Just a few years ago, we did have a number of people under lock and key, and crime was significantly lower than it is today. Of course, not so much in his city, because they never tried that. Other places like New York, California, we actually enacted a 3 strikes law here. On the logic that if you are convicted of a felony, well, that's hard cheese. A second felony, gee whiz, you're not too bright. But a third felony conviction tells us you are a criminal. This is what you do for a living. You prey on other people for a living. And so we're going to lock you up for a nice long time. Not because we're trying so much to punish you. I mean, really, you're a waste of time. No, we're trying to protect the public from you. Well, it costs a lot of money to take these people off the streets. Yes, it does. Incarcerating a prisoner is costly. But the people who make that point never talk about the other cost. What's the cost of not having that person locked up? That's the cost that you are seeing paid today on the streets of Chicago, L.A., New York, and so many other cities. That is the cost of non-incarceration. How do you like it? You say, I don't like it. I don't blame you. I don't either. So let's grow a brain and start getting the criminals off the streets. Now, this is the job of local governments. City police departments, county sheriff's offices. But what if they don't do it? What if they have leadership like Karen Bass, Mr. Brandon in Chicago, who don't believe in arresting and incarcerating criminals, don't think it's a good idea, think the criminals should be simply run through a revolving door, given a bail-free release on their own recognizance, and set back out again. Not naughty boy, don't do that. Next thing you know, they're holding up another gas station or shoplifting in another Walmart or, whatever it is they do for a living. Now, this is going to bring us to a fairly serious constitutional issue. And those are the most serious issues we face in this country, being a constitutional republic. In Washington, D.C., President Trump has the authority to indulge in these extraordinary measures. That's federal territory. He's the president, head of the federal government. He can do that. But now he's saying, well, I'm going to do the same thing next in Chicago and Los Angeles and here and there and everywhere. And frankly, I'm very doubtful of his legal right to do that. One of my callers, person who gets in touch with us every once in a while, emails. It's unfortunate that the presidential executive powers have been abused, starting with Barack Obama with his cell phone and his pen. The reason that the Republicans will ultimately be losers is because they say we're better than that and refuse to do similar to what the Democrats have done. The genie is out of the bottle and precedent has been set. We need to grow the huevos and fight fire with fire. If the GOP refuses to do so and demand decorum, like so many kooks in the past, like John McCain, Mitt Romney, etc., the Democrats will win in the end. T offers that as a communication. Wow. So he's acknowledging that this behavior is wrong. Right at the first, he says, it's unfortunate. Executive powers have been abused, starting with Barack Obama. So he is clear on the concept. Executive powers have been abused. And he goes on to call for Republicans to out-abuse the Democrats. We have to be more energetic, more enthusiastic, more effective at abusing executive power than the Democrats have been. That's how we win. At that point, what have we won? As I think about this, I'm reminded of the words of John Adams, one of the men who was present at the foundation of our constitutional republic. He was commenting on the document. He said, our Constitution, I can't remember the exact words, but so help me God, I'm not going to mess this up so far as the meaning is concerned. Our Constitution is fit only for the governance of a virtuous and decent people. It is wholly inadequate to any other. Now, in John Adams' time, there were people who were not virtuous and were not decent. There were pickpockets, there were footpads, there were highwaymen, there were murderers. What happened to them? When they were caught, they were tried, and if found guilty, they were subjected to punishment prescribed by law, either incarceration or even execution. Well, you know me, if you've listened to this program for any length of time, I'm a firm and enthusiastic supporter of capital punishment, always have been. And it's not just for the economic reason. After all, if you take an offendant and 86 him, think of all the money you save. You don't have to support him in prison, things like that. So it's an economic measure, but it's more than that. It's more than that. It is a message sent to the people. There are certain heinous crimes, i.e. capital murder, the ultimate theft, that we just don't tolerate. If you viciously take the life of another human being, what if it's self-defense? What if it's a fair fight or something like that? That's different. That's why we have categories like second degree, manslaughter, things like that. I understand those exist. Crimes for which the death penalty is totally appropriate. But does that cover most criminals? Hell no. I've even seen leftists arguing these days. They differentiate between violent and nonviolent offenses. They say, we shouldn't punish nonviolent offenses. Give me an example of a nonviolent offense. Shoplifting. 3 or 4 guys with plastic bags come into a place of business. They rip off everything in sight and out they go. They haven't touched a human being. Haven't set any fires. So it's a nonviolent crime. And the fact that this type of crime is now winked at in so many of our jurisdictions is why it is so widespread in so many of our jurisdictions. If you give the people the idea that they can simply walk in and take what they want, a number of them will. A number of them will. At that point, what happens to your neighborhood? Your stores. Your neighborhood depends on stores, particularly selling necessity, things like groceries, drugs, stuff like that. Those stores fold up and go away. They can't make a profit when significant portions of their merchandise is simply being taken out the door for nothing. You can only raise your prices so far to compensate. So again, getting back to T's point, is it proper to say, our Constitution is not adequate to the governance of the people we now have? Our population has degenerated to a point where our Constitution is no longer fit for its governance under the criteria set forward by John Adams so many years ago. Frankly, this is the only rational argument I've ever heard for a new constitutional convention. We need to draw up a new, more autocratic constitution, more authoritarian constitution, one that gives the government greater power over us. And if you're not feeling a little sick to your stomach right now, I'd worry about you. What has made America great is its limitations on governmental authority and the concurrent extension to its citizenry of a maximum degree of individual freedom. But that must be counterbalanced by a willingness to preserve public order and decorum. Again, there were criminals in John Adams' time. Does anybody suppose that he or our other founders would have gone along with the idiotic nonsense being spouted by the likes of Brandon Johnson these days? Or the Zoran Mondamis, or the Karen Basses? It beggars imagination. Of course they wouldn't. So is there a contradiction? Is our Constitution one that is selective in its grants of freedom? Yeah, in a sense. You have the freedom to behave as you wish, provided you do not damage other people. And if you decide that your business model is criminal activity, that you will subsist and survive by victimizing other people, by stealing what they have, taking what they have, rather than earning your own. At that point, you should lose your freedom. Because if you are using that freedom to rip off your fellow citizens, then you should be deprived of it. And is the primary purpose of that punishment? Well, yeah, there's some punishment involved, but the main thing involved is the protection of the decent people that you've been victimizing. Brandon Johnson screams about how it's awful, it's racist to go out and track down and incarcerate offenders. He says, well, we wind up with these outrageously high numbers of black people being arrested. Mr. Johnson, you're looking at the wrong end of the equation. Why don't you look at the people who are victimized? Latest figures I saw, Chicago is once again the murder capital of the United States. Hundreds of people a year lose their lives violently in Chicago. And guess what? Something like 4 out of 5 of them are black. So what are you telling me, Mayor Johnson? That you care deeply about black criminals, but you don't give a flying damn about their black victims? And to just talk about murder victims is really only the tip of the iceberg. Victims of burglaries, assaults, carjackings, robberies, all of these things in Chicago, predominantly black people and people of other colors. The same statistics show that people like me, Anglos, we're actually fairly safe in Chicago. So who do you care about, Mr. Mayor? Do you care about your constituents of color who are being victimized on a daily basis, sometimes brutalized on a daily basis? No, you say, rounding up and incarcerating people, that's been tried, that doesn't work. Goodness gracious me, what a flathead. The Democratic reaction to President Trump's federal crackdown on crime was as predictable as the dozens of shootings in Chicago over the holiday weekend, which left at least 7 more people dead. Chicago's violent crime spikes during the warmer months, and it's become too commonplace to shock us. CBS News reported that during Independence Day weekend, 5 people were killed, 36 were injured. Over Labor Day weekend, in 2023 and 2024, a total of 13 killed, 67 wounded in shootings around the city. The Wild Wild West was peaceful compared to this. When Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson was asked repeatedly in a television interview last week whether putting more police officers on the street would help curb crime, he called that approach antiquated. He tried to change the subject. I believe the city of Chicago would be safer if we had, affordable housing. In 2022, Manhattan Institute scholar Rafael Mangual pushed criminal injustice, what the push for decarceration and depolicing gets wrong, and who it hurts the most. The book cites empirical data on crime control strategies that Mr. Johnson dismisses as out of date. If I had to summarize one of the most consistent and robust findings in the criminological literature in a single sentence, Mr. Mangual writes, it would be something like this: more policing means less crime. A 2005 academic paper on policing in Washington found that an increase in police presence of about 50% leads to a statistically and economically significant decrease in crime on the order of 15%. A 2016 study concluded that an increase in private police patrols around the University of Pennsylvania campus in Philadelphia decreased crime in adjacent city blocks by from 40 to 70%. Increased police presence isn't felt equally across racial and ethnic groups. Places like Chicago particularly benefit from additional cops where murder victims are overwhelmingly black. According to a 2020 analysis of race-specific effects of larger police forces, there's a strong consensus that increasing the presence and visibility of police officers reduces crime. Moreover, authors found that although total reduction in homicide is roughly equal across black and white victims, the decline in homicide is twice as large for black victims in per capita terms. Mayor Johnson's desire to talk about affordable housing instead of better policing stems from a widely held view on the left that crime can be blamed mostly on disrespect. It's the mayor's views that are out of touch. Not only are most poor people not criminals, but the most impoverished communities in the U.S. aren't the most violent. Further, violent crime is significantly lower in earlier days when poor Americans were materially much worse off than they are today. If anything, more evidence points to crime driving poverty than the other way around. In other words, poverty doesn't create crime, crime creates poverty. Merchants are more likely to abandon lawless neighborhoods where operating costs are higher, taking employment opportunities and economic activity with them. As businesses leave, the tax base shrinks. Property values decline. Public services suffer. In the 1940s and 50s, the homicide rate for black males fell by double digits, and black incomes rose faster than white incomes. Safer neighborhoods are conducive to upward mobility, and police help keep neighborhoods safe. The last major demonstration we saw of this was the administration of Mayor Giuliani in New York City. When he came into office, the city was described as ungovernable. Now this is gone. You can't save it. Mr. Giuliani came in, appointed a new police commissioner. Their idea: enforce the laws, all the laws, so that the word gets out and the ambiance is created in the communities that the laws are to be respected. If you throw a rock through a window, you are going to get a free ride. And what's more, that window is going to get replaced so that your handiwork within 24 hours or so will have simply vanished, and you won't accomplish a single thing except to get yourself in trouble. What happened? Crime didn't just decline, it collapsed. Crime rates went down by 60, 70%. These aren't modest declines. Again, these are just dropping off a cliff. And what happened then? Whole neighborhoods, entire blocks of New York were restored, reborn, reinvigorated. Suddenly, landlords whose buildings were essentially worthless, husks occupied by vagrants, bums, and criminals, gang members. Well, once you chase away the vagrants and gang members, all of a sudden, you got a piece of real estate there. There might be some people who'd like to move into the apartments. There might be some businesses who'd like to open on the ground floors. Suddenly, that building that you wouldn't ever dream of spending any money on renovating it or keeping it up, just talk about wasting your dough, all of a sudden, renovating that building is an opportunity. And again, entire blocks come back to life. And a lot of poverty is eradicated. Why? Because of public safety. We aren't going to eliminate crime or poverty anytime soon, but there are better and worse ways to address both. Family makeup and education play important roles in reducing social pathology. Cultural habits and attitudes also matter. Single-parent households were a minority of all black households for most of the 20th century. The welfare state expansions of the 60s and 70s, Lyndon Johnson's handiwork, subsidized irresponsible and self-destructive behavior, led to social retrogressions that some black communities still haven't recovered from more than 50 years later. The black underclass is already burdened with broken homes, its children funneled into schools with the least effective teachers and highest dropout rates. Thanks to people like Mayor Brandon Johnson, who advocate lenient law enforcement, millions of law-abiding black families must contend with living in hyper-violent communities. As Thomas Sowell has remarked, when you take away stable families, decent schools, and safe streets, there's really nothing much left. National Guard troops aren't a long-term fix to the mayhem that plagues Chicago and other catastrophically mismanaged big cities, but Mr. Trump has performed a public service by calling attention to the problem and pressuring state and local leaders to act. The president's Democratic predecessors have responded to rising crime by ordering the Justice Department to investigate the police. Mr. Trump's response is to send in reinforcements. These are the observations of Jason Riley in today's Wall Street Journal. But this was written, obviously, before he had the news that Mr. Trump's reinforcements may not be consistent with the Constitution and laws of the United States of America. So what can be done? Well, what Giuliani and Bratton did in New York was to set an example. And what Mr. Trump has done in Washington, D.C. is to set an example. And it is to be noted that the very left-wing mayor of Washington, D.C., one Muriel Bowser, has made positive comments, said, hey, look at the results in the streets. She is behaving rationally. She's saying, this is working. This is saving lives. Many of those costs of criminal activity now are not being paid. It is altogether possible that once the National Guard succeeds in restoring order in the nation's capital, once that order has been restored, perhaps the Metropolitan D.C. police force will be equal to the task of maintaining order, which, after all, is an easier job than reestablishing it once it's been lost. But what then of other cities? What then of President Trump's threats to send the National Guard into cities that are not federal territory? Now, Judge Breyer is not the Supreme Court of the United States, but his decision was based on real law made by a real Congress and signed by a real president. It wasn't the kind of silly arguments that we see from some judges who simply want to obstruct the president and are willing to essentially do whatever they have to do to accomplish that goal. whether it has any basis in law or not. This time the law is cited. It's there. It's real. T's solution? Damn the law. We have a job to do here. We cannot be bothered with constitutional niceties. I'm sorry. Those constitutional niceties are what make this country what it is. I take them very seriously. So am I being unreasonable and unrealistic here? Am I trying to have my cake and eat it too? You want your constitutional process and limitations on government, but you also would like safe streets. Perhaps by demonstrating what he has demonstrated in Washington, D.C., Mr. Trump can motivate voters in cities throughout the country to take back their streets. In places like Seattle and San Francisco, new leadership has been elected that is taking these responsibilities far more seriously. Mayor Lurie in San Francisco is not offering the same public administration that his predecessor did. Across the bay in Oakland, the situation is entirely different. So is this president, Mr. Trump, required to simply stand back and watch as some cities, not all of them, but enough, simply vote for the criminals? Something we've never seen before in American politics. Always there was a dependable, overwhelming majority of decent citizens who would, when they were sufficiently aroused, they would at last come out and vote to make the streets safe and to get the criminals off of them. Is this no longer the case? Well, I'm interested in what you think about this. Been watching my phone board here to see if anybody was calling in while I was going on with all of that. Nobody yet. But I tell you what I'm going to do now. I'm going to run some ads, a couple of minutes, and that'll give you plenty of time to get to the telephone and organize your thoughts so that you can let us know what you think. 831-265-5050 is the telephone number. I'll be back in a couple of minutes.
It's hot up here. Hi, folks. Warren Knox here of Knox Roofing. Yes, it really does get hot up. Okay, because Knox team has been sweating it out on rooftops for 30 summers to make certain your roof will keep you warm and dry through the winter. If you have any doubt about your roof will weather the winter, call Knox Roofing today and ask about a free rooftop inspection. We love it up here. 461-0634. Thanks, folks.
You need a clean, pleasant space to conduct business, but you don't want the burden of a long, expensive lease. Your solution is Satellite Co-working and Digital Media Studio on Soquel Avenue. Satellite offers private offices, meeting and conference rooms, even co-working by the hour, day, week, or month. Schedule a tour at satellitecoworking.com. Mention Santa Cruz Voice for 20% off your first reservation.
Get ready to help build one of America's first local news and talk streaming radio stations. SantaCruzVoice.com. How do you do it? By donating either your time, money, or both. You'll be helping the Voice team construct a powerful infrastructure, one that we can all be proud of. To donate your time, your money, or both, go to SantaCruzVoice.com and click Support. SantaCruzVoice.com and click support.
It's high time to celebrate the opening of the new Hook Outlet Dispensary, 1129 Mission in Santa Cruz. Get in on the opening fun and really low prices on the Hook's unmatched selection of top-quality medical and recreational cannabis flower, vapes, drinks, gummies, and concentrates. The Hook Outlet is now the West Side's source for finest cannabis at the lowest prices. Get in on all the opening fun and low prices at the new Hook Outlet. HookOutlet.com for details and deals.
Okay, we are back live. I'm Charles Freedman. Thank you very much for being with us today. News Talk from 9 to noon, and the topic this morning is a big one. It's the question of order in our streets. President Trump is determined to restore it. Does he have the constitutional ability to do that? And have we reached a point in our national life where we don't want that anymore? I mean, Brandon Johnson, I've been critical of him on this program, but he got elected mayor of Chicago. The people are the ones who put him into office. That was a direct election. Now, one thing I did notice at the time, the number of votes cast in that election was minuscule. Mr. Johnson had an opponent, and the election was fairly close. Both of them got something like, a little bit less than 250,000 votes. So that's a total of, say, 500,000 votes cast in a city the size of Chicago. I can remember when Mayor Daley, the legendary William Daley, was first elected mayor of Chicago. He got over 800,000 votes. He won the election, but that was just his vote. Then there were other candidates, at least one or two, running against him. So what's your point, Charles? My point is that in the election that Mr. Brandon won, the number of voters who participated was tiny. Most Chicagoans, by far the overwhelming majority of Chicagoans, did not vote for mayor in the last election at all. And this is something we've seen a lot of out here in California as well. In the election that Zoran Mamdani won, the primary election where he defeated Andrew Cuomo, most New York Democrats, there are a lot of Democrats in New York, most of them didn't show up to vote. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez first went to Congress by getting something like 13,000 people to vote in a Democratic primary. That was enough to win. Should it have been? How many Democrats were there in that congressional district? 200,000? And this tiny handful is enough to accomplish it. I guess my message right now is we have the ability to take things back basically when we want to. How can we get started? Well, in November, let me see, this is September, October, November, 2 months from now. That's right around the corner. Courtesy of Gavin Newsom, we are going to see a statewide referendum on gerrymandering. Newsom and his people are trying to put through an outrageously tortured map, far more egregious than anything. This is supposed to be a reaction to what those horrible Republicans have done in Texas. I've seen the Texas map. It's a partisan map, but it is nowhere near as gross as what Gavin Newsom plans to do. He's not fighting fire with fire, he's fighting fire with napalm. So it has to be defeated. Can we? Well, there are so many more Democrats in California. I know that. But in election after election, most Californians don't even show up to vote. So what if we do? There's a novel concept. Actually get off your butt and cast a ballot. Whee! Amazing. And what if we show up? What if every Republican and conservative, woefully outnumbered as we are, what if we all actually show up while they maintain their regular performance of 50% of them don't even bother to cast a ballot? All of a sudden we're competitive. All of a sudden we can win. And bear in mind that people who vote left in California aren't monolithically so. In the last election, conservatives put on a ballot measure to actually make shoplifting a crime again. A return to rationality. It passed. Not only did it passed with something like 70% of the vote. It carried San Francisco. What about Gavin Newsom? Oh, he was against it. Fought it tooth and nail. Said, oh, no, the idea of actually going after these criminals and telling them they can't shoplift, that's wrong. Newsom was humiliated. Doesn't that feel good to say those words? Newsom was humiliated. Those words actually taste good. So let's savor the flavor. 2 months from now, let's have Newsom humiliated again. That I would like to see. Now, before we move on completely from this topic of President Trump and federal troops, etc., today the editorial board of the Wall Street Journal weighs in on the subject, and I will share what they have to say with you because they are consistently one of, if not the most articulate voices for conservatism in American politics today. And because the Wall Street Journal has the largest circulation of any newspaper in the country, they are also rather effective. Trump, troops, and the mayhem in Chicago. President Trump suggests Chicago is next for his political clash with Democrats on crime. But Mayor Brandon Johnson and Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker promise to resist, and it could be an ugly showdown. The Chicago crime problem is real. 58 people were shot over Labor Day weekend. But the limits on federal power are real, too. On Tuesday, a federal judge ruled Mr. Trump's use of the National Guard in Los Angeles broke the law. Congress spoke clearly. In 1878, it passed the Posse Comitatus Act, prohibiting the use of the U.S. military to execute domestic law. Judge Charles Breyer writes, amid unrest over Mr. Trump's deportation efforts, the president called in the National Guard to protect federal assets. But the judge says troops actively assisted law enforcement, such as doing traffic control for a raid on a cannabis farm 80 miles from downtown Los Angeles. Judge Breyer orders the executive branch to cease and desist, while saying that 300 National Guards still in L.A. can stay there and continue to protect federal property in a manner consistent with the Posse Comitatus Act. So Judge Breyer did not, did not go all the way in his ruling. He didn't simply say, oh, this is just terrible, we can't do any of it. No, he was perfectly willing to say, hey, here's where the line is, and up to here, engagement of the National Guard is rational, reasonable, and legal. Beyond that, we have a problem. He stayed his ruling until next week, giving Mr. Trump a chance to appeal, but it's a moment for the White House to reflect before it moves on to Chicago or anywhere else. Mr. Trump seems genuinely appalled at the violence in America's big cities. Give him credit for jolting the public out of complacency. In Chicago, Mayor Johnson says crime is down some 30%, but it's still one of America's most crime-ridden cities, especially in poor neighborhoods. 8 were killed last week alone. In 2024, there were 573 murders, the most in the country, and that's for 13 years in a row now. This is a failure of democratic big city governance. And Mr. Trump is showing in Washington, D.C. that streets can be made safer if political leaders have the will. The president has deployed federal officers and the D.C. National Guard. Carjackings are down 87% from a year ago. Mayor Muriel Bowser said last week she opposes massed immigration agents and troops from other states, but we are greatly appreciative of the surge of officers. Yet Washington is a federal district where Mr. Trump can use executive action to take control of the local police department. His options in Chicago are far fewer, since the president lacks the power to boss around state and local police. Last week, Mayor Johnson signed an order that says Chicago cops can't be assigned to joint patrols or arrest operations alongside federal law enforcement or military personnel or National Guard units involved in civil immigration enforcement. So, what's Mr. Trump's plan for Chicago? That's a good question. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem said Sunday that administration intends to expand immigration enforcement in the city, and that's a legitimate federal power. Johnson and Pritzker don't have to like it, but the more inflammatory their denunciations, the likelier to encourage unrest. Already Mr. Johnson is warning in hyperbolic fashion about grandmothers thrown into the back of unmarked vans and tanks in our streets. If the protests in Chicago get violent, President Trump might again say he needs the National Guard to protect federal agents or buildings. But that's a limited mission, not the kind of street cleanup of violent neighborhoods that Mr. Trump keeps promising. If he tries to use troops for that job, he's asking for another federal ruling that he's breaking the Posse Comitatus law. He can invoke the Insurrection Act to call in troops to restore public order, but that needs to be a resort to quell riots. Most Americans want cops on the beat, not soldiers on the streets. Governors sometimes deploy their own National Guard units to back up law enforcement, as when New York Governor Kathy Hochul sent troops to the subways last year. But that's state action, and that's exempt from Posse Comitatus. For Mr. Trump to declare an insurrection to send in federal troops over the objections of an elected governor would be a risky escalation. Chicago's chronic crime problems belong to Mr. Pritzker and Mr. Johnson, the country's worst mayor. Mr. Trump can't duplicate there or elsewhere what he's doing in D.C. because there's no place in America that's like the nation's federal capital. But if Mr. Trump's anti-crime push makes D.C. safer for good, the president will be able to say he showed residents of America's big cities that they don't have to put up with the daily violence and mayhem that's tolerated by their failing political class. That's the key. Right there in the final paragraph. Share it again. Just the last paragraph, 6 little lines. If Mr. Trump's anti-crime push makes D.C. safer for good, the president will be able to say he showed residents in America's big cities that they don't have to put up with the daily violence and mayhem that's tolerated by their failing political class. One of the oldest concepts we have, to lead by example. This is something that Mr. Trump has been remarkably reluctant to do. And it's too bad, because often I think he could have been effective in this regard, leading by example, as when he successfully came up or enabled the development of a vaccine for COVID, when America was crying for one. The example that he set in Iran, when he was willing, in the face of an intransigent, let's say, be blunt, basically insane interlocutor in international affairs, to finally say, you will not have atomic weapons, and I will see to it, and blast them to kingdom come. In terms of crime and law enforcement, Mr. Trump has a laboratory where he is now conducting an experiment in policing and in public safety. This is an experiment in the sense that, well, it's something he's undertaking right now, but frankly, it's an experiment that we know the results, don't we? This dramatic increase in law enforcement presence on the streets of Washington, D.C. will crush criminal activity. The question is, how long will the experiment last? Washington, D.C. is one of those cities where there are large pockets of poor neighborhoods that struggle for basic services. Where's the grocery store, the supermarket? Where can you go to get, prescription drugs, things that you need for your daily life? Clothing stores, for gosh sakes. What's happened? Well, if people come in and simply loot these stores, and the shoplifting has gotten to the extent where now you could call it looting. They strip the stores of merchandise and walk out. The stores don't simply restock. They fold up. No business can withstand that type of repeated, concentrated attack. It's just not possible. So what happens instead? We talk about underserved neighborhoods. And the people who decry this, they focus their anger and frustration in the wrong direction. They cuss out Safeway. How dare you close your store? You're bigoted. You don't want to serve black customers. Hey, I'll tell you what. Black people, white people, brown people, they all spend green money. What brings a retailer to a neighborhood? The potential to serve customers and make a profit. You want to get paid. Everybody wants to get paid. What is unreasonable about that? Well, bear in mind, to the left, wanting to get paid, wanting to earn a profit is in itself morally wrong. You're supposed to open a grocery store just for the satisfaction of giving away food. The Zoran Mamdamis of this world, this is their puerile thinking. And so if Safeway closes a store because of high crime, well, shame on Safeway. They shouldn't have done that. That's just a horrible thing for them to do. No, that's just a symptom. The cause is the criminal activity that made it impossible for Safeway to operate that store in that neighborhood. And if you do something about that, Safeway will reopen that store. And those neighborhoods will reawaken. If you cut out the gangrenous flesh, healthy flesh will grow. It is 10 o'clock at SantaCruzVoice.com. I'll be back in 6 minutes. Okay. I don't know if... I think I may have just busted my headset once and for damn all. Let's see here.
Hey, babe!
Oh, here we go.
Can you bring me a beer?
Excuse me?
Listen, I had a long day. I was just hoping that maybe you
I
could...
had a long day too. It doesn't.
Well, thank God. I can hear him. Okay, this is a Babylon Bee skit. Obviously, you have husband and wife. He wants a beer. She's a little bit put out. Well, let's find out what happens.
My long day not matter?
I just asked you for a beer. It's not like I asked you to make a sandwich or something. Please calm down. Okay, maybe this will make you feel a little bit better, okay? Look at that.
What?
My mom got you an apron.
This isn't an apron. This is a message, a symbol of patriarchal oppression and a shackle of cis heteronormativity. I belong in the world, toppling gender stereotypes, objectification, inequality, and the subjugation of half the world's population.
Breaking news, World War III has officially commenced. As our nation goes to war, the president has declared that one able-bodied member of each American household will be drafted into the military.
On the other hand, traditional gender roles exist for a reason. I'm your wife, and I belong in the kitchen.
What?
It's the man's place to work and provide and hypothetically fight in wars. Which beer did you want? Here, take them both. Here. Can I make you a sandwich? Let me make you a sandwich, sweetie. There's extra ham in the fridge. I'll go get some right now.
You know,
no
it's
problem.
funny. I was thinking maybe you were right, and actually you can do everything that a man can do.
No.
And so, hey, why don't I make you a sandwich?
No, it's okay.
You just
I
give
can
me
do
the
it.
apron,
No,
honey.
I really
Just
like
give me the
it.
apron
No,
and
it's a great apron. No.
You know what? It'll be a sign that you and I are dismantling the patriarchy together. And as I wear it proudly in the kitchen, you'll be out there in the trenches, proving to the world that you are not some princess that needs saving.
This apron really isn't your color. You know what's a great color on you? Camel green. Camel green looks phenomenal on you. Yes.
No,
Bring that
no, no,
guys.
I would never wear green.
But you have to defend me. I'm our baby.
What? How did you?
News update. It seems as if the president misspoke, which has never happened before. There will be no draft. Apparently, President Biden was just complaining about the Oval Office being too drafty.
About that sandwich you were gonna make me.
She sped away.
Babe? Not my color.
Hi, Justin Trudeau here.
Oh my gosh. Funny stuff. Okay, well, at least my headset is still working. I'm grateful for that because I thought I had messed it up. Okay, we'll be back in another 3 minutes. I got stuff to do. Okay. Doot, 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 doot. Uh-huh. Okay, well, that's a possibility. Ooga booga, ooga booga. No. Okay. again. It is 10:06. Hour number 2 begins. I'm Charles Freedman. Reach the program at 831-265-5050. We have our first caller on the line. So I'm going to dispense with this and bring along that person. First of all, let's settle up here and say good morning. Hi there. How you doing?
Good morning, Charles. Yeah, this is Evan. I was just kind of wondering about your thoughts on crime dropping in Chicago. You were talking about that mayor there. I sent you an email wondering if you would want to read that, or just says how the crime's dropping. I wouldn't probably say it maybe because of him, but maybe because of the past mayors too. I'm not sure. Just your thoughts, sir, on that.
Crime is down in Chicago from record high levels. It is still at very high levels, and the people of Chicago don't feel safe in the streets. This is the key. We got into a disagreement or a conversation a little while ago about New York City. You made the point that, well, crime was already declining in New York when Mayor Giuliani was elected. And that's true. It was. But it was still regarded as a crisis by the people of the street of New York City. And when Mayor Giuliani came in and implemented new and extraordinary measures to fight crime, rates plunged by far larger numbers, and the people of New York, overwhelmingly Democrats, credited this Republican with having made the city governable again. So I'm talking about statistics on the one hand and also political reality. Mayor Johnson now enjoys an approval rating in Chicago of 8%. So evidently 9 out of 10 Chicagoans disapprove of the way Brandon Johnson is running the city. So for him to go around saying, well, crime is down 30%, people are looking at him and saying, we don't give a flying damn, it's still too high. And you're going around saying that incarcerating criminals doesn't help. So Mr. Johnson is doing himself no favors.
I'm sorry, is he a white man or a black man?
Mayor Johnson is African American, but frankly, I don't see that makes any difference. I've been criticizing his policies and his statements. This show is, we don't race bait here.
No. The reason why I question that, because I guess his statement, you even mentioned the fact that he thought it was racist to arrest people.
That's his statement.
Which was exactly. That's his statement, and I don't agree.
I don't either. And I mentioned the statement, but again, I do my best on this program. Issues these days are often racially charged, but it is never my intention to race-monger on this program. I don't respect that, and I try to stay away from it as much as I can.
No, it seems like these political leaders are saying things that are a little over the top. As far as his racist comment,
imagine that.
I wouldn't agree with that. But at the same time, I could see where he's looking at the black people getting arrested than the white folks.
Well, again,
the numbers are there.
Again, the numbers I would point to are the numbers among victims. Black people are being shot and stabbed and raped and robbed and carjacked out of all proportion to their numbers in Chicago. Mr. Johnson, the mayor, never says anything about that. So it appears that he's perfectly willing to play the race card when it comes to arrests, but when it comes to innocent citizens victimized, try and find him. That is bizarre. That's bizarre.
Yeah, yes, it is, sir. I understand that thinking isn't quite sound, Here's just my thoughts. I'm not I feel like there is a big majority that want police on our streets. And I think that's based off of our how we've been taught through younger age of believing these police are the reasons we're having these low crime rates. I don't believe that. I think we are the way we change our policing. I don't think we need to be throwing everybody in jail. Our police system needs to change.
Who in the world? Wait a second. Who in the world talks about throwing everybody in jail? That's a crazy thought. That nobody's no. You say something like that, and that just gets every hackle I've got going. Nobody's talking about throwing everybody in jail. What we're talking about is apprehending and incarcerating people who make a living by victimizing others. Let me say, you're
victimizing these. You're talking about victimizing.
You're a decent, honest citizen. You'd like to be able to walk the streets in safety, I'm sure. Now, if you're walking down the street, your idea is you're going to go down, you're going to buy a knee high and relax. Okay, fine. A guy comes along, pulls out a knife or a gun and says, "Give me your dough." What do you do? Well, being a rational person, you say, "Okay, fine, I'm going to give you my dough. I want to walk out of here with a whole skin." But wouldn't it be nice? I mean, that guy who just stuck you up, this is what he does. He sticks people up and takes their money. That's how he lives. That's his job. He's at work now. Now, wouldn't it be nice if some police officer yesterday or the day before, or maybe even an hour ago, had caught him doing the same thing to somebody else and said, "Hey, wait a minute, you're coming with me." Read him his rights, get him off the street. He's the person that I want off the street so that you, Evan, have the ability to go out in peace and comfort in your own community and do the things you want to do. Now, if you think that's arresting everybody, I got a problem.
No, that's why I wanted to change my statement up. But it was a bit wrong. No, we seem to be thinking, like here in California, for example, the people that were trying to survive and unfortunately steal from these Walmarts, these Safeways that you've mentioned, that seem to not pay their fair share of taxes. I don't know. I don't feel like we need to be incarcerating people that are trying to survive and eat.
I'm sorry, but the people who are going and staging these coordinated rip-offs in places like Macy's and Walmart and Safeway, these are not poor people starving to survive, stealing to survive. These are criminal gangs organized for the purpose of performing rip-offs of merchandise, which they then, the next day you're going to find that listed on eBay or something like that. This is their business model. The idea that we're dealing with people here who are starving, there is help available for people who are starving. There are food banks, there are other agencies that literally will help starving people. This is not, the Charles Dickens London that we're living in.
I get you. I appreciate the talk, sir. I'm on your boat.
Well, thank you. Have yourself a great day. Appreciate the hope. My God, his phone cut him off in mid-sentence there. Well, that happens sometimes. Okay, well, that was our first call for the day, and I'm certainly glad to have had it. 831-265-5050 is the telephone number if you would like to join us and be the next caller for the day. I had thought that we might go on to something else a little bit here. There are some words of wisdom that I discovered today. One, Holman Jenkins writes a column. It's titled Business World. But, oh, hey, we've got a call coming in. I won't even get started on this. I'll just take the next call right away. Callers are always our top priority. See who we've got here. It looks like Mark. Hello, Mark. Welcome to the program.
Oh, that's quick, Charlie. You know, it's irony. There's irony in the leadership of the state of Illinois complaining that there's not a need for additional law enforcement to bring order in that state. And Illinois is the only state I know of where 4 recent governors have been thrown in jail.
Yeah, they weren't all, and they weren't all Democrats either.
No, Otto Kerner, George Ryan, Rob Blagojevich, and Dan Walker. Blagojevich. They were all thrown in jail, and they were the previous governors of Illinois.
Yeah, that goes back. Otto Kerner was governor of Illinois during the 1960s, so that goes back quite a ways. But just the same, the point, the only other state I can think of where governors generally go to jail after office, for a number of years that happened in West Virginia. But, these are states that have histories of corruption. Again, the idea, you started by saying, how can these state leaders, Governor Pritzker, Mayor Brandon, say, oh, we do not need additional law enforcement on our streets? Mayor Brandon was ludicrous. He was on Joe Scarborough's program. Joe Scarborough is very much on the left. He's an admirer and a political friend of Mayor Brandon, and he's trying to help him. He's throwing him a life preserver. He's saying, so don't you think that additional law enforcement would be helpful? Brandon would not say so. He was asked something like 3 or 4 times. Scarborough kept saying, well, don't you think? No, absolutely not. I won't have it. So Mayor Johnson is literally living in some alternate universe where additional law enforcement personnel and additional incarceration of people whose business model is victimizing other human beings, this doesn't work. I'm sorry, it's Mayor Brandon that doesn't work.
Well, correct. And, you look at who's affected in Chicago. It's the black population are the victims of crime. And it's their neighborhoods that are being a victim of crime. The local stores are closing. The drugstores are closing. They have the things called food deserts because no grocery store can exist in these communities because of the shoplifting, because of the robberies. CVS closes down a drugstore. Where you got a prescription, you got to get on a bus and go across Chicago, get it filled. And it's just because these stores don't want to close down; they're forced into it. Exactly. And you look at who's affected by this crime. It's the common guy in Chicago. You look in California, same thing. What communities are affected by crime? Gavin Newsom, he's not. He lives up in the $1 million areas of Marin County in a gated community. He's okay, but the working guy, the working stiff, no, it's brutal. And if his grocery store has to raise prices to compensate for the shoplifting, who's affected there? It's the mom going in to feed her kids. It's not the drug addict out on the sidewalk, trying to support his meth, addiction. No, it's that mom trying to make her family go. So, no, I have no compassion for the common criminals running around, and they're raising hell in the minority communities, the poor communities. That's who's affected by this.
Poor people are more in need of safe streets and effective law enforcement than anybody else, because just a glance at the statistics will show that they are more likely than anyone else to be the victims of criminals. So if you get the criminals off the streets, you have done the biggest favor that you can possibly do for low-income people.
Correct. Kids can walk to school. Moms can go to the grocery store. The dad can run his little local independent business. No, it's the best thing you can do for families in those communities is law and order.
And yet, when you talk about doing it, oh my God, you get all kinds of hell and high water brought down upon you.
Yeah. And the irony of the past governors of Illinois, is there that 4 of them went to jail, and now they're saying, well, we don't need outside law enforcement in our state because things are great. Well, past history doesn't support that.
They actually had a safer city when William Hale Thompson was mayor and Capone was running things.
That's true. The crime was focused on the various crime families battling it out. But that's very true. But and we didn't have to have police officers in our schools like we do now. And again, they said, well, let's have restorative justice for the students. Well, they tried it, and a student got murdered in our local high school, and they had to bring the police officers back. And I think the parents and the kids are happy to see that they feel safe going to their local school. But it's a sad comment on where we are now.
Brings me back to the question that I raised right at the beginning of today's broadcast. President Trump has now been rebuked by a federal judge for exceeding his authority in these police matters. But the need for policing is obvious, and John Adams it was who said, well, our Constitution is designed for the governance of a virtuous people and is wholly inadequate to the governance of any other kind. And have we arrived at a point where a sufficient number of Americans are no longer virtuous people? I mean, we've always had a criminal element. John Adams coped with a criminal element, but it was always a tiny, tiny minority of our population. The vast majority of people, regardless of their race, creed, color, politics, anything else, were honest, decent people. Now, if you get to a point where, say, 5% of your population are criminals, you're dead.
Well, correct. And again, it's sad. I've been watching Turner Classics, and they've been doing quite a lot of films from late 30s and into the 40s, and looking at society and then the concept of what it should be and what it is, and the courtroom scenes where I forget the name of the movie. The attorney came in and he said, they were trying a journalist, mm-hmm. in this colonial America, and they stated, he's putting down the government, and the attorney came in and said, well, my client is guilty, but this, and then went on explaining, his guilt is telling the truth, and I just wish more of that would come about. But lately, right now, Turner's had some great movies on, including all the Tarzan movies.
You like those? I've never been able to get into them. Yeah, I noticed that the other day.
The first one was fine.
The Marino Sullivan skinny dipping. That's pretty good.
Yeah, and Johnny Weissmuller, he was great. Okay, but look up the history of the governors of Illinois and see what grounds they're coming from on complaining about Donald Trump.
Well, thank you for the call.
Thank you, Charles.
Have a great day. We have got Zach on the line. All of a sudden, the phone lines are very busy, and that's always nice. Zach, I was thinking of you just yesterday because, yes, they had, Turner Classics every August. They do what they call Summer Under the Stars. And for the entire month, each day they feature a different star. And on the last day of August, the star they featured was Irene Dunn. And they showed Showboat.
Oh, I think I get Turner Classic Movies if I have Hulu. I need to check that because I found it on Internet Archive and I was about to watch it, but I had some other stuff I had to do, so I didn't get to watch it yet.
Celeste and I watched it yesterday. Just yesterday. It's the first time I'd seen it in a while. Charles Winninger as Captain Andy. Of course, Paul Robeson singing Old Man River is worth the price of admission all by himself. But I've found that there are two places where Helen Morgan sings, and she just sends chills up my spine. So the boy singer is, Alan Jones, who also was in A Night at the Opera with the Marx Brothers, where they needed a boy singer. He was big on radio. Okay. He's a tenor, but, other than that, he's a nice enough guy. You will see, the first face you see in it is that of Eddie Anderson, also known as Rochester, great black performer who picked up all kinds of bit roles doing things in Hollywood. But, geez, it's just... Hattie McDaniel is in it.
I've heard that name.
Giving Paul Robeson hell. It's just a delightful movie. You'll have a wonderful time watching Showboat. And early in the movie, there's a scene that involves a miscegenation case that points out just exactly why Showboat was such an important show in 1927. It was bringing this type of lunacy to an audience that was, in many cases, unaware that such foolishness was going on, or if they were aware, didn't really care about it that much. There's also a message in Showboat.
Okay. I will watch it, and I will pay close attention for that. I'm a careful student.
It says here you wanted to call about shoplifting. Now, I have to ask, of course, are you for it or against it?
I'm very much against it. So just to point out that tough on crime definitely works. I visited with my family. My uncle he lives in Arizona. He got married to a different lady. Anyway, so we went to Arizona, Scottsdale. And all throughout Arizona, I noticed something. I said, what is different about this place? Other than the freeways are really clean and this and that. And I said to myself, I know what it is. There's no cages on anything. There's nothing. It's like a normal shopping experience where you don't have people following you around. And I said, I wonder why that is. And I go, I wonder how they handle shoplifters. If I'm sure there's one or two people in Arizona that shoplift. Mm-hmm. But so how they do it.
So you decided to give it a try and find out.
I know. End up in Joe Arpaio's Tent City or something, which I've seen, by the way. That's a real thing. I've seen that. There is Joe Arpaio has an area, Maricopa County, that has a bunch of tents, and there are people in those tents that's their jail that do petty crimes. But anyway, how they do it is they prosecute by having different stages. So they do prosecute for shoplifters less than $1,000. This carries potential penalties of up to 6 months in jail and fines of up to $2,500. So that's a deterrent. I was there in Arizona. I saw it with my own eyes. It's a deterrent. If you are tough on crime, and you're not crazy tough, you're not going to put them in jail the rest of their life. Yeah, they made a mistake. Usually people, like you say, that people that steal are not stealing to survive. They're stealing to fence it. By the way, and fencing an item in Arizona, that adds a felony. So once you get past $1,000, the crimes turn into felonies. And this works. This does work in Arizona. I can tell you, I felt like I was in a really rich area of California when I was in the whole state of Arizona. If that makes sense. Like I was in Carmel, or something like that.
Well, all of us, I often use the phrase, what you see depends on where you stand. Well, I stand here near Freedom, and I do my shopping at the Freedom Safeway, and until recently at the Freedom Rite Aid. Well, Freedom Rite Aid is now closed, and one of the reasons why, I'm sure, is because of pilferage. They just, were suffering all kinds of losses in this regard. They had certain products, like I need Zyrtec for my hay fever. You had to ask somebody to go over and unlock it so you could get that. But now, Rite Aid is gone, and Safeway just did a huge remodel. Now, I've been joking about it because it's kind of like, the old joke, how did Helen Keller's parents punish her? You know the answer, don't you?
Oh, I don't, but...
they rearranged the furniture. They rearranged the furniture.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Now, in this particular case, Safeway is treating every one of their customers like Helen Keller. They've rearranged the supermarket so that all those things that you knew where they were, and they'd been in the same place for years, all of them are in different places now.
Yeah, you can empathize with Helen Keller now.
And
Me too. I
absolutely. And at the same point, all of the alcoholic beverages, which I have need of, are now, well, not all, but all of the distilled spirits are now under lock and key. Mm-hmm. So if you want to buy a bottle of scotch, you have to track down a store employee, and not just any store employee, because there's only one or two of them who have the key to the liquor cabinet. And then what they'll do is they'll take what you have up to the check stand, put it by the checker, and when you go by, you can pick it up. And all of this is due to the fact that they had so much pilferage. A couple of years ago, I used to go in and buy diamond matches, kitchen matches. All of a sudden, they weren't there anymore. And I asked, how come you don't carry them? And they said they were all working out the door.
Matches? Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so this idea that criminal activity imposes a cost on the entire community, I've seen it in action. I've seen it firsthand. And bear in mind, grocery stores operate on a very small profit margin, maybe 2%, something on that order. So if people come in and shoplift, they walk out with merchandise. Well, other prices have to be raised to make up for that. So essentially, if I walk in and shoplift, you're going to be paying for what I took.
Right, exactly. And Safeway is real. I mean, the manpower, or person power, I should say, to take that all the way up to the counter when they could be doing something else, like stocking a shelf. You got to think about the loss of productivity on their part. I mean,
absolutely,
it's a total.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a total mess. I was in that we shop at the same Safeway, Charles, and I saw with my own eyes a person who I recognize that lives down in the creek, on the other, the homeless camp. Anyway, they walk over there, grab a box of firewood, and walk out with it. And I go, oh my gosh. And so I go over and I tell the employee, and then he goes, oh, really? He goes, yeah, I'll tell the security guard. I go, okay, I just want to let you know that, you lost some merchandise there, because, I'm not going to tackle him. I'm not going to get sued. So, and, or hurt, whatever. And so anyway, he doesn't tell the security guard, the employee that is. It's just people don't care in this state about. They don't see what you and I see, and other common sense people see, that it hurts both the business and the customer.
The thing is, you said they don't care. Not caring is a learned behavior. Under normal circumstances, when people see a theft, they do care. What's happened is they've been conditioned to understand that nothing's going to be done. That's the problem. It's not that they don't care, they are apathetic, and their apathy has a real cause. It's not insane, it's not foolish. They have seen an adjustment now of activity, of reaction, and so on, and they realize that if some bum from across the creek comes in and hauls off a box of firewood, nobody's going to do a thing about it. So why bother?
Yeah, they're apathetic because no one's going to do anything higher up anyway. So that you need to start. So what Trump's doing with those cities I think is going to have effect, but a lot of lefties are trying to state the case that he's going outside of the Constitution, and I don't know, maybe he is a little bit, or he's acting like a fascist, maybe he is a little bit. But I'll tell you what, it is going to have an effect dramatically on crime. And I've seen it with my own two eyes in Arizona. And if you are tough on crime, I felt like I was in a rich neighborhood all throughout that state. It was just really pleasant, very, very, just almost surreal, actually.
And
but
see, there's nothing fascistic about that.
Right.
That's what's known as normal. That's what we older people, that's what we call normal. And losing it, I mean, it's not fascistic, it's dystopic, is what's happening.
Right.
This idea that all merchandise now, and more of it, has to be kept under lock and key. And if you want the merchandise, you have to get somebody to come and unlock it for you. Across the street there, over where Freedom Food Center used to be, is Ace Hardware. And great business. Manuel Rodriguez runs that and 5 other Ace Hardware stores. You go into that hardware store now, you want to buy a flashlight, it's under lock and key.
Yeah.
You'd be amazed at how much of their merchandise. Of course, they've had their spray paint under lock and key for years.
Oh, yeah. I'm there all the time.
This is just, I can remember a time when I was a young man, you'd walk into a hardware store, there was no lock and key at all in the store. It was just merchandise on display. You could ask about whatever you wanted to ask about. If you wanted to try something out, take it off the shelf, look at it, etc., put it back where it was. Or if you decide you want to buy it, take it to the check stand, pay for it, and you're on your way. Normal.
Yeah. Normal, the freedom to make a decision and take your time and not bug any employee if you had it yourself.
Yeah.
No problem.
And if you want help, ask for it. But this situation we are devolving into nowadays, and this is the new normal now. And the question is, will we ever get back to the old normal? I don't think so. I don't see it happening.
Not unless we get tough on crime and have a state attorney or something, or a governor that switches that around.
Exactly. Well, thank you for the call, and
you got it.
By all means, dig up Showboat. When I recommended it to you, I hadn't seen it for a while, and I really it gave me a laugh when it came up just within a day or two of the last time we talked. And I thought, oh my God.
I'll try to look that up tonight. I know where I can watch it, but if you say Turner Classic Movies, I'll try to find that so I could watch it on my big TV.
Well, they showed it, I guess it was two days ago, something like that. I don't know if you record things or not, but if you did, then you've got it there.
I did not, but I'll look around for it. I'm determined to watch it. I will watch it one way or the other on my phone or the big TV.
It'll pay you. Have a good day.
Thank you. You too. Bye.
It is 10:40, and I've got another call coming in, but I have to run my ads, so I'm going to do that. I'm going to ask my caller to be patient for 2 minutes, and we will pick up.
The Santa Cruz County Fair opens Wednesday, September 10th with FMX Rampage at the Grandstand featuring Adam Jones, X-Game gold medalist with his action team. Thursday, it's the Outlaw Mariachi. Friday, it's the White Album Ensemble. Saturday, Red returns, the Taylor Swift tribute band. And Sunday, the Chata Show. And that evening, Los Dinos. And our drone show at 9 o'clock each night. Pre-sale tickets and information at SantaCruzCountyFair.com.
The Santa Cruz County Fair.
When you need help escaping from an abusive relationship, call on the Angel.
Hello, I am Attorney Angel Hess, and I am ready to help you. Whether you or a loved one needs legal protection from an abusive spouse, cohabitant, or neighbor, I will help you. I have over 7 years' experience working as a lawyer protecting others from abusive relationships.
Stop the abuse now. Call on the Angel, Attorney Angel L. Hess at santacruzlegal.net.
Cannabis is one of nature's most beneficial plants. Hello, I'm Jenna. Treehouse Dispensary, we use information about cannabis to build community. Listen to Carly.
Thanks, Jenna. For those who wake up in the middle of the night, Treehouse suggests a THC CBN chocolate edible blend like Sleepy Time from Sensi Chew. Sleep the night away.
For answers to your cannabis questions, ask your friends at Treehouse Dispensary, 3651 SoCal Drive in SoCal, or ourtreehouse.io.
What's your family eating for dinner? Chef Ben here at the Back 9 Grill and Bar, where you can pick up family dinner that feeds 4 to 6 hungry people. Family meals include a full rack of ribs, a whole smoked chicken, pound of pulled pork, and plenty of barbecue sauce. Served with a full quart of baked beans, coleslaw, macaroni and cheese, dinner rolls, pickles, a side of onions, and for dessert, brownies with a pint of Mary Ann's vanilla ice cream. Call and order your family's dinner about 15 minutes before you want to eat. See you at the 9.
At 10:42, we say hello once again to Evan and find out what's motivating him this time. Yes, sir. Welcome.
No, I apologize for calling in one more time.
That's okay.
Yeah, great callers already. I thought I got caught off, and I wanted to thank you for having me on, for sure. And then real quick, Rite Aid. I guess had a lot of opioid-related lawsuits, estimated between $1 billion and $10 billion. So that was kind of a primary driver for their closing of their businesses, unfortunately. Because I liked Rite Aid.
That's nationally. You know, I've always wondered about that because Rite Aid, and they're not alone. There's, Walmart, CVS also had problems in this regard. You get somebody who walks in with, all of these are drugstores. They operate prescription pharmacies. You walk in with a prescription for some controlled substance. Doctors are empowered to prescribe controlled substances. If I'm selling morphine on the street, I'm a criminal. But if I'm a doctor, I can prescribe morphine for a patient. And a pharmacist is empowered legally to fill that prescription. So they had, as I recall, the idea was you had all of these prescriptions coming in and being filled, and they went to these drugstores and said, "What's the idea of filling all these prescriptions? You shouldn't have done that." And frankly, it's always struck me that the real problem was with whoever wrote the prescriptions. Now, if they were fraudulent and the drugstores honored them anyway, well, then that's a problem for the drugstore. But if you had, everybody was Elvis's doctor and overprescribing, which, has been known to happen, then there's an issue with the prescribing physician. But I don't believe that was the problem with the particular Rite Aid store in Freedom. Now, this is obviously only one Rite Aid store out of the entire national chain, so you're correct. That's an entirely different matter. But frankly, I miss Freedom Rite Aid. I shopped there all the time. And over the last few years, I'd go in and I noticed that there were a lot of shelves that were simply empty. And I'm convinced that one of the main reasons that merchandise was being pilfered, and so they stopped stocking it. And you can only cut back so far before you don't have a business anymore.
Yes, sir. I appreciate it. Thank you again. Sorry for the second call. I just wanted to call in and thank you for the call.
It's an interesting point because what you're saying is correct. There were tremendous legal cases brought against various pharmacies for filling prescriptions for controlled substances and they would say, okay, well, you've got a population in this town of 50,000 and you're filling 100,000 prescriptions, or nutty numbers of this sort. But again,
I kind of wonder why you don't have a lot of local pharmacies. Maybe that's why you have a lot of legal troubles in the prescription industry.
You mean
interesting.
like we used to have, like Johnson Drug and Mayway and things like that, Eastlake Pharmacy.
Aptos has one. I don't know. I forgot what that's called. I live here
this
for
is
sure.
this is one business that has really the independent local outlet has simply vanished, and nowadays
Horschneider's I think closed down too in Santa Cruz.
Really? Oh my God, they've been around for
pharmacy.
forever. Well,
Yeah. Anyway, appreciate it there, Charles. I'll leave you to do your the show. Thank you again.
Thank
You
you.
have a great rest of your day.
Appreciate
Bye-bye.
the call. Okay, we have, let me see, 14 minutes left before we get to the top of the hour. I had been looking forward to getting into this other topic, and then we got a whole bunch of phone calls. So don't let me discourage you. Phone calls are the top priority on the program. If you make one, I will immediately take it. I've got the phone screen right up here in front of me, so no excuses. 831-265-5050 is the number. Holman Jenkins writes a column called Business World. I think it's not really aptly titled because many of the things he writes about have scope far beyond business. Despite being caught fabricating the Steele dossier, despite being caught lying about Hunter Biden's laptop, despite being caught trying to hide Joe Biden's senility, despite foisting an untested drone in his place, Democrats almost won in 2024. They almost didn't hand the presidency to Donald Trump. Now, obviously, a column that begins like that is going to interest me because this is a point I've made on this program time after time, and it frustrates me when I hear the predominant narrative seems to be Trump won a huge landslide victory, which is objective nonsense. It's not true. What Holman Jenkins says here is true. They almost won. 48 points to 50 points. A 2-point spread. This underlines the remarkable nature of President Trump's vulnerability and the Democrats' inability to put forward a useful, loyal opposition. Mr. Trump was always a good bet to stretch or abuse his powers, but so would Aunt Betty under the circumstances. Democrats by now should have regained some moral self-possession. So giant is the opportunity, on behalf of influential interests, to act as a restrainer of Trump shakedowns. Instead, you see the payoffs from CBS, ABC News. You see foreign leaders doling out obedience. Smart money for now acts like checks and balances are missing in action. Let's refer to a want of seriousness. A microcosm. What does Vladimir Putin have on Mr. Trump? Remember that? That was the chant of the Russia hoax. What does Vladimir Putin have on him? What's he blackmailing him with? Well, Anne Applebaum is still asking that question. She's a Russia scholar. The Steele dossier has been long since discredited, and this person, this intelligent person, is still going around saying, what does Putin have on Trump? You might ask the name of every recent president. The one way Mr. Trump was least likely to differ from his predecessors was in risking his presidency over Ukraine. It was Barack Obama, after the first invasion, who stipulated that Russia's interest in controlling Ukraine was greater than our interest in defending it. You don't say that. That cedes to Mr. Putin what we now see as his escalation dominance. Ms. Applebaum says, all of Europe shares her mystification at Mr. Trump. This is laughable. Europeans today, yesterday, tomorrow, they oppose Ukraine in NATO. Their leaders and their own political interests are keen to do as little as necessary to keep displacing onto the U.S. responsibility for Europe's security. They are stepping up now to the degree that Mr. Trump has coerced them to step up. And it has been coercion. He's had to work very hard at it. Fortunately for him, he has had their actual pledge in the NATO charter that he could wave at them and say, hey, how about this? Miss Applebaum's unworthy attitudinizing doesn't help Ukraine. Mr. Trump finds it too easy to wave off such insinuations as more Russia, Russia, Russia. She just adds to the burden on allied politicians to twist themselves out of shape to cater to Mr. Trump's domestic interests. Regrettably, the one U.S. 2024 candidate who tried to recruit Americans to a more muscular role, Nikki Haley. She won Republican primaries in Vermont and D.C., and a handful of write-in votes in the general election. A historian not appreciating the political realities here is failing at seriousness. In office, Mr. Trump has given a 70s poli-sci class come to life. It's all about who gets what. Inserting himself as arbiter, exacting his vig. His fatal flaw will catch up with him. He doesn't think through long-run consequences for himself or the country. In the meantime, the two-party system generally operates pretty effectively to redivide the spoils down the middle, but it uses elections to do so. Our dysfunctional Democrats make the approaching midterms unusually pivotal for better or worse. Mr. Trump's chips are on the GOP holding its tiny House majority and keeping the Democratic impeachment machine off his back so he can continue his high-handed ways. He looks likely to succeed, unless the economy turns on him or Democrats, in a discontinuation of their amazing achievement so far, find a leader who doesn't make Mr. Trump seem like the lesser risk to millions of voters. Donald Trump is a rare specimen, but not that rare. A bully in politics. The truly rare specimens, the ones who make our times what they are, well, return to the first paragraph. Remind yourself how Democrats conducted themselves for the last 3 presidential cycles. A passage comes in Edward Luce's new biography of Zbigniew Brzezinski, Jimmy Carter's national security advisor. He quotes Democratic and press grandees on how standing up to North Vietnam was the equivalent of standing up to Hitler, words they promptly forgot when their war went the wrong way, and put Richard Nixon in office. A small amount of honesty today would go a long way. Say, when condemning Mr. Trump's resort to lawfare, a few words of Democratic repentance for opening this Pandora's box. As petty as they are, Mr. Trump's accusations against Senator Adam Schiff, a Fed governor, and New York's Attorney General for misleading statements on mortgage forms are but a replica of the trivial loan lying case the New York brought against him. Finally, don't ignore what's going on in France. The West's worst case of overpromising, overtaxing, and overregulating until the welfare state collapses in on itself. Reminds me of what happened. I constantly hector Mr. Trump for refusing to deal with the biggest problem that America has. And it's a legitimate gripe. The biggest thing we have going, entitlement reform, which would actually address our national debt. Donald Trump pledges he will not do it. Well, France shows us an example of why that's true. Emmanuel Macron was elected president of France. Brand new party. Not the French Socialist Party, not the Rally for the Republic, the old Gaullist Party. No, this was a new party. I can't remember what he called it. But Macron had this third way energy going for him. And once he got into office, he actually comes up with serious proposals. Reforms of rather arcane labor laws, and finally an adjustment in the retirement age from, I think it was 62 to 64 or something like that over a period of time. And the excrement impacted the blades. Oh my heavens. You had Frenchmen out in the streets rioting. You can't do this to us. I wonder if that's what Donald Trump understands would happen to him if he were to try to do the same thing here, if he were to try to do as Macron did in France, to actually tackle those big issues, to actually do the job of president. Macron is still in office, but politically he's a spent force. He's broken. Donald Trump looks at Macron's example and says, I'm not going to do that. And again, it's a very interesting thing trying to decide how you think about this, or how I think about this. On the one hand, shame on him for not doing his job. Shame on him for allowing a serious crisis, our most serious crisis as Americans, to simply fester and fester. But on the other hand, what if the job is undoable? Because the American people don't want it done. And if you attempt to do it, they will crucify you. The last few American politicians who were serious about this issue are all out of politics now, defeated. I don't know what the percentage is of Americans who actually understand the numbers, even in a vague and macro sense, and understand what's at stake. But I do know the political consequences of getting serious about it. You are out of office, period. And can Donald Trump be blamed for not wanting that to happen to him? Our political economy will become one of taking stuff away. Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. This is the megatrend behind MAGA, as well as the Democrats' descent into brain-dead leftism. It figured in the anti-Obama Tea Party rebellion back in 2010. It figured in Europe's populist upsurge today. On top is coming a second megatrend, the return of war, as Russia and China see the Western world's paralyzing fiscal dilemmas as their opportunity. You only have to listen to their words to know this. Our weakness, Western weakness, is the greatest danger we face. Because our strength is our deterrence. And deterrence keeps the peace. There are always people around who want to change the status quo. And the way to change the international status quo is by force of arms. Vladimir Putin understands that. That's why we have a war going on in Ukraine right now. That's what happens when deterrence fails. Mr. Trump is about the business of attempting to replace deterrence, and that is a praiseworthy task. It is now 11 o'clock. I'll be back in 6 minutes.
Prepare your home for back to school and back to work with fall deals at the Living Spaces Labor Day event. Cozy up with sofas starting at $295.
Culture matters. It's the primary source of social progress or regression. No more clearly than in the status of women. The Judeo-Christian culture and perhaps a more upwardly civilization has produced over time the law codes, language, and material prosperity that have greatly elevated women's status. But this progress is not shared everywhere. There are still hundreds of millions of people that live in a culture, the Islamic for instance, that takes female inferiority for granted. Until recently, these cultures, the Western and the Islamic, were for the most part separated. But that is changing, dramatically so. Large numbers of immigrant men from the Middle East, South Asia, and various parts of Africa have brought a different set of values to the West, specifically Europe. More than 1 million arrived in 2015 alone. More are on the way. As a result, crimes against girls and women, groping, harassments, assaults, and rape have risen sharply. These crimes illustrate the stark difference between the Western culture of the victims and that of the perpetrators. Let me be clear, not all immigrant men, or even most, indulge in sex attacks or approve of such attacks. But it's a grave mistake to deny that the value system of the attackers is radically different from the value system of the West. In the West, women are emancipated and sexually autonomous. Religiosity and sexual behavior or sexual restraint is determined by women's individual wishes. The other value system is one in which women are viewed as either commodities, that is, their worth depends on their virginity, or on the level of a prostitute if they're guilty of public immodesty, wearing a short skirt, for example. I do not believe these value systems can coexist. The question is which value system will prevail. Unfortunately, this remains an open question. The current situation in Europe is deeply troubling. Not only are Muslim women within Europe subject to considerable oppression in many ways, such norms now risk spreading to non-Muslim women who face harassment from Muslim men. One would think that Western feminists in the United States and Europe would be very disturbed by this obvious misogyny. But sadly, with few exceptions, this does not appear to be the case. Common among many Western feminists is a type of moral confusion in which women are said to be oppressed everywhere, and that this oppression, in feminist Eve Ensler's words, is exactly the same around the world, in the West, just as in Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, and Iran. To me, this suggests too much moral relativism and an inadequate understanding of Sharia law. It is true that the situation for women in the West is not perfect, but can anyone truly deny that women enjoy greater freedom and opportunities in the United States, France, and Finland than they do in Iran, Pakistan, or Saudi Arabia? Other feminists have also argued that non-Western women do not need saving, and that any suggestion that they need help from Western feminists is insulting and condescending to non-Western women. My perspective is a practical one. Any efforts that help Muslim women, whether they live in the West or under Islamic governments, should be encouraged. Every effort to pressure these governments to change unjust laws should be supported. Western feminists and female Western leaders have a simple choice to make. Either excuse the inexcusable or demand reform in cultures and religious doctrines that continue to oppress women. Nothing illustrates this better than what happened in Cologne, Germany on New Year's Eve 2015. That night, during the city's traditional celebrations, numerous German women, 467 at the last count, reported being sexually harassed or assaulted by men of North African and Arab origin. Within 2 months, 73 suspects had been identified, most of them from North Africa. 12 of them have been linked to sexual crimes. Yet, in response to the attacks, Cologne's feminist mayor Henriette Reker issued an arm's-length guideline to women. Just keep an arm's-length distance between you and a mob of Arab men, she advised Cologne's female population, and you will be fine. Mayor Reker's comments underline the seriousness of the problem. A culture clash is upon us. The first step in resolving it is to unapologetically defend the values that have allowed women to flourish. Feminists with their organizations, networks, and lobbying power need to be on the front lines of this battle. Their relevance depends on it. And so does the well-being of countless women, Western and non-Western. I'm Ayan Hirsi Ali of Harvard University for Prager University.
3 begins. The hour changes, the telephone number does not. 831-265-5050 is the way to reach us. 831-265-5050. And I would be only too happy to have another hour like the last one. We had several people call in with several different points of view. It was absolutely delightful to speak with each and every one of them. And I guess the one thing we've lacked, I guess, in the name of diversity, no women. And that's not unusual. In the years I've done talk radio, one of the things I've learned is that callers are overwhelmingly male. Now, frankly, I don't know the reason for that. I don't pretend to know the reason for that. It could be that more women who are listening are engaged in some kind of activity that precludes their calling in. We have people who email me because they can't call in. I understand that. But those emails generally come from males as well, so maybe that's not it. I do have a couple of ladies who give the show a buzz every once in a while, but I would like to specifically remind all of the female-type women in the audience, your calls are just as welcome as the guys, and your observations are of necessity going to be from a different point of view. So don't hold out. Give me a buzz. Let me and our other listeners have the benefit of your insights, your views, and your perspective. 831-265-5050. And the regular laws will hold. I will take your call immediately, and you can decide what we discuss. Can't do any better than that. Okay, in order to, I've got an email here. Let's see if it's somebody who wants to raise a particular. Okay, Evan has sent something concerning a Rite Aid bankruptcy, opioid lawsuits. Yes, I'm familiar with this. Opioid cases being, this is obviously a corporate bankruptcy, but that's too bad. He called in and we got to discuss this on the phone, so I'll go ahead and move on to other things. But I still think that the idea of holding the pharmacies responsible, there's got to be more to it than that. Got to be more to it than that. I want to direct a few words to the topic of organized labor. And I was brought to this. Today I noticed a piece that I find very unfortunate. The state of California is run by a governor and legislature who are obviously enthralled to organized labor. They get a lot of money from organized labor. And this is simply a reality that goes on when you invest that kind of money in politicians. Well, what's the old Chicago saying? An honest politician is one who, once he's bought, stays bought. And the California governor and legislature have definitely done that. California Governor Gavin Newsom on Friday announced a deal with Uber and Lyft. A deal that they couldn't refuse. Democrats in Sacramento will reduce auto insurance coverage mandates that are driving runaway litigation in return for the companies letting drivers collectively bargain. Unions have long sought to unionize California's 800,000 rideshare drivers. Now they may finally succeed, thanks to Democrats. This is a historic This is a historic agreement between workers and businesses that only California could deliver, Mr. Newsom said. That's true. Only California Democrats would extort rideshare drivers and riders to reward their union friends. Voters in 2020 enacted Proposition 22, which defines rideshare drivers as independent contractors and provides them with various benefits. Independent contractors aren't allowed to unionize under federal antitrust and labor law, but Democrats devised a crafty end round that invokes the state action antitrust exemption to grease the wheels for unionization. The legislative deal would allow unions to petition the state's Public Employee Relations Board for certification. Voila! Unions can organize drivers free from antitrust liability because of state oversight. The precise language of the legislation was still being drafted as this is written, but we're told it won't diminish business benefits drivers receive under Prop 22. That proposition, incidentally, was originally motivated by, once again, an act of the California legislature in which they essentially took away the freedom of all sorts of independent contractors in California. I mean, the big target, obviously, was Uber and Lyft drivers. That was where the major interest was. But in the law, when you talk about independent contractors, well, you cast a wide net. This was a law, I can't remember the name of it, AB 35 or some damn fool thing. Anyway, it was written by an assemblywoman from San Diego who, prior to becoming a member of the state legislature, had been a union organizer. So she goes into office with an axe to grind, and she drafts this legislation which essentially deprives independent contractors in California of the ability to be independent contractors. Says to them, no, if you're doing work, you have to be an employee. And unfortunately, that law essentially flew in the face of objective reality. There are plenty of businesses, plenty of people in the state of California for whom independent contractor is the way they do business. Right here in Santa Cruz County, we have a significant number of musicians and performers. How do they work? They're independent contractors. Show up, play a gig, we'll pay you. State of California, oh no, you've got to be an employee. You got to pay Social Security taxes and unemployment insurance taxes and this and that and the other thing. And your employee, the contractor has to subject himself as an employee would to an employer. The whole idea being we want them unionized. Let's keep going here. Democrats' move to let drivers unionize may have drawn a legal challenge from rideshare companies. But Democrats agreed in return to enact modest reforms to the state driver insurance coverage mandates, which invite lawsuits and increase fares. In most of the country, mandatory insurance costs account for 10% or less of the average Uber fare. In California, it's 32%. In Los Angeles County, 45%. Mr. Newsom said the deal will make rideshare more affordable for millions of Californians. Maybe if collective bargaining agreements don't drive up driver costs, but Republicans in states like Florida, Georgia, and Louisiana have enacted legal and insurance reforms without requiring anything in return from business. Democrats in Sacramento are once again taking up politically captive businesses for a ride. I am reminded of one of the phenomena we've witnessed over the past, well, certainly over my lifetime. The gradual decline of organized labor. And I've talked about in the past the idea that labor unions came into being. They're fundamentally reactionary organizations. Now, reactionary, you hear that word and you think, oh, you're being mean, you're beating up on them. No. Reactionary, what does it mean? It means you're reacting to something. What were workers reacting to? The answer? Abuses, unfair practices, intolerable practices. Businesses in the 19th and early 20th century all too often regarded employees, their workforce, as one might regard a wrench or a bearing or something like that. A bearing burns out. What do? You throw it away, get another one. Worker burns out. You throw them away, get another one. We want more production. Speed up the assembly line. The workers are already working at, we don't care. We can get 10% more out of them. Speed up the assembly line. This cavalier That's a gentle word. This dehumanizing attitude of management toward labor manifested again on a daily basis in a million ways in a million places. Pervasive. Well, of course, what are workers going to do? They're going to organize in their own defense. They're going to react, as any normal human being would, to an intolerable situation. Who created organized labor? Management. American business created unions. There's no question about it. And unions were an absolutely necessary development at that time in American history. There were a couple of things going on then. There was this unpleasant attitude. There was also the industrial model that was in place then. And over the past, well, again, over my lifetime, this has slowly but inexorably changed. Today, factory floors aren't where most American economic activity takes place. As a matter of fact, a lot of factory floors are populated by robots today. Americans are making their way more and more with their ingenuity, their ability to find a need or want and fill it, to come up with a business or a product that fits into a particular niche that will satisfy a given number of customers and thereby provide enough income to keep an enterprise going. Flexibility is an absolute necessity for much of this, and the old model of labor management, and what's it say in the contract? It's the height of inflexibility. Tighten that screw. I can't tighten that screw. Why not? I'm not a member of the Screw Tighteners Union. You've got to get a member of the Screw Tighteners Union to do that. Saying, oh, that's an exaggeration. The only reason it's an exaggeration is because it's based on reality. And there used to be comedy bits years ago that were based on exactly this kind of thing. Just for the hell of it, let me see if I can dredge this up. I don't know if it'll be here or not. But this goes back over 100 years, if I can find it. What I'm looking for is Uncle Josh and the labor unions. By God, oh, it's on Columbia? I didn't know he'd recorded it on Columbia. I have it on Victor. Well, says it's here. I'll go ahead and play it. We'll listen to it. See what you think of this.
Well, too long last winter, a feller come to Pumpkin Center and said he was a walking delegate for a labor union. He said everything was union now in order to be successful and quoted the United States as an example. Well, we held a meeting down to the schoolhouse and had a lot of speaking on the subject. Jim Lawson was chairman. Jim said he used to be a union man. He worked for the Union Pacific. Well, we organized a lot of unions, putting there everybody joined except me. I thought I'd wait a spell and see how it was going to work. Mother said I joined every fool thing that come along anyhow. Well, we got more labor unions now than you can shake a stick at. Well, when it comes springtime, I had to hire a lot of help to work on the farm, and I had more trouble than a Democrat at a Republican rally. I hired one feller and taught him to plow, and he plowed a furrow across the field and stopped. And I went out and asked him why he didn't turn around and plow back, and he said that wasn't his job, turn the horse around. That was the job of the horse turner union. So I had to hire another fella, go along, turn the horse around. Well, when it come dinner time, none of them would come in to dinner, so I went out and asked them why they didn't unhitch the horse and come to dinner. And they said that wasn't their job to unhitch the horse. That was a job of the horse unhitcher union. Well, when we got to the barn, none of them would feed him. Said that was a job of the feeders union. Well, I come to the conclusion if I was going to get anything done, I'd have to do it myself. So I went out to take in some hay, what the haymaker union had left after they had worked what they called 8 hours. And that walking delegate come out there and told me I couldn't take in that hay. I wasn't a member of the union. Well, I asked him how long it would take to become a member, and he said 2 weeks. Well, I told him I'd like to get my hay in. Looked as though it was going to rain, and I feared it'd get spiled. Well, at the first forkful, every darn one of them went on a strike and called me a scab and wouldn't let me work on my own farm. Well, I've got a rifle and a double-barreled shotgun and 2 bulldogs now, and they don't none of them belong to the union. And if that walking delegate comes around my place again, by gosh, he's going to be a running delegate.
Now, the fellow you've just been listening to, his name was Cal Stewart. He created a character called Uncle Josh with that laugh of his. Very popular in the period before World War I. And that particular recording, according to this, was done in 1919, but he recorded that song years before that. Recorded that routine years before that. But this was a comedy routine. And why do you do a comedy routine? Because it's got a basis in truth. When Cal Stewart he wrote all of his own material. When he wrote this thing, Uncle Josh and the labor unions, what inspired him? He read the daily papers. He saw this inflexibility of the unions. Oh, well, the horse turners union's got to do that. The unhitchers union's got to do that. And, the type of feather bedding that unions were noted for. So he put together this piece. Well, over time, these sclerotic activities or behaviors on the part of unions became more and more problematical. As the economy grew more and more flexible, less and less based on machine technology, a couple of things happened. First of all, business models changed, and second of all, and even more important, attitudes changed. Earlier I described the, let's be gentle and say, unfortunate attitude of management towards employees in the 19th and early 20th century. In the post-war era, it has become, well, certainly almost impossible to find an employer who does not understand, believe, and know that the employees of his organization are the single biggest asset he has. They're the ones who make it work. It's not the machines. It's not the building. No, it's the employees. It's the people, the labor. And as a result, modern, some would say enlightened, I would say simply more reasonable, more grounded, more rational managers want to keep their workforces happy because they know that there's always somebody else down the street will be happy to have them. And that if they don't keep that worker reasonably satisfied, they'll lose them to somebody else, one of their competitors. The point I'm making here is that the atmosphere that California is still trying to promote, this pervasive unionism, is a thing of the past. But that does not stop certain people from attempting to promote it. I got a kick out of this. Sharon Block, professor at Harvard Law School and a former member of the National Labor Relations Board, and Benjamin Sachs, professor of labor and industry at Harvard Law School. What do they say? Quote, unions are as popular as ever. Our labor laws haven't caught up yet. In the late 40s, in the 50s, something like 35% of our labor force was unionized. And bear in mind, that was all private sector because in those days, public sector unions weren't permitted. Governments in those days still adhered to the ideas of, for example, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, a man who was very pro-union, signed into law the Wagner Act, which we'll talk more about in a few minutes, enabling union organization and promoting unionism. FDR was a huge friend of organized labor. But he was implacably opposed to unionism in the public sector. Oh, no, absolutely not. The model is not the same. It doesn't work. When the employer is not a private for-profit enterprise or individual, rather instead is the people, the general public, everything changes. That's what FDR believed. And again, in the 50s, when unionism hit its high point in America, there were no public employee unions. It was all private sector. It was about 35% of the workforce. Today, in the private sector, unionism is at about 8% of the workforce, which means that it has lost more than 3/4 of what it had. 8%. So 1 in 12 private sector employees today is unionized. And these Harvard professors think that the reason unions are as popular as ever. It's the fault of our labor laws. So the first thing that's said here, let me see if I can find it here. Here we are. Unions are as popular now as they've ever been. Yet the labor law that's currently on the books, the Wagner Act of 1935, isn't strong enough to protect workers who want to unionize. Now, this goes on for a number more paragraphs, but really, don't you think that you can stop reading right there? Because it's just been made clear to you that the people who are writing this are lunatics. Or certainly people they're fantasists. So let's put it that way. What's it say here? Unions are as popular now as they've ever been, yet the labor law that's currently on the books, the Wagner Act of 1935, isn't strong enough to protect workers who want to unionize. Well, I mentioned a few moments ago that private sector unionism hit its peak in the 1950s. What was the operational labor law then? The Wagner Act. So we're told that the same Wagner Act, under which 35% of private sector workers were unionized a lifetime ago, isn't strong enough to protect workers who want to unionize. That is a ludicrously irrational statement. If unions are as popular as ever, which is how they begin by saying unions are as popular now as they've ever been, this is poppycock. So frankly, I'm not going to bore you with any more of their presentation because obviously these people are living in a fantasy world of their own manufacturing. And this is the same kind of fantasy world that motivates the governor and the legislature of the state of California. They are ardent unionists, ergo they believe that unions are popular. It's kind of like an ardent Republican like me who believes that, well, everybody's a Republican, aren't they? It's so inherently right and true, and what we believe is just hunky-dory and neato, and so we're as popular as we've ever been. No, as a matter of fact, we aren't as popular today as we were in the 1980s when we had a master politician and vote-getter, Ronald Reagan, heading the party. But that requires objectivity to admit. And if there's one thing you will not find among unionists, it's objectivity. They care about their unions. Well, other people care about other things. So, I mean, is that really a vile criticism? A businessman, what do you care about? I care about my business. Sure you do. You're vested in labor unions. You care about unions. Okay, sure you do. The problem is, in this particular case, we're talking about people who care about unions to the point where they're willing to toss objective fact and logical reasoning out the window. And this first paragraph reveals that that's exactly what they've done. The share of workers who are in a union is below what it was before we had any labor laws, they say. Listen to yourself. So you didn't need labor laws to facilitate unions back when they were in demand. But now that they are not in demand, what can unions do? Well, through their organizations, they can act to seize political power and compel people to join their unions by enacting public laws and policies that coerce such behavior. This is what we've got going on here in California. The sheer irrationality. You know, these both Harvard Law School and, well, they're both at Harvard Law School. So I guess, well, Harvard hasn't come out very well lately. There's been a lot of criticism, etc. But when I look at this, the quality of reasoning that comes out of Harvard Law School professors, I can't help but wonder, you know, are people paying six figures to go to school here and deal with these screaming memes? And these are the people who'll be giving them their lectures, evaluating their work, giving them their grades. Good Lord, I'd rather go to McHale's Navy for my law doc degree. I'd rather go to J. Cheever Loophole, the Legal Eagle. Remember him? Part was played by Groucho Marx, who was perfect. Certainly a lot better than the actual law professors. Unbelievable. Once again, when I come face to face with absolute irrationality, it always just, well, at the very least, it surprises me. And when I see it coming from Harvard Law School, I mean, I've got to admit, I still have enough respect for institutions like that to think, oh, yeah, you know, we're going to hear something good here. And then we're subjected to a flood of nonsense. It's 11:35. Let's go ahead and grab a couple of commercials. We'll be back presently. The telephone number remains 831-265-5050. I'll be back in a couple of minutes.
It's hot up here. Hi, folks. Warren Knox here of Knox Roofing. Yes, it really does get hot up here, but it's okay because Knox team has been sweating it out on rooftops for 30 summers to make certain your roof will keep you warm and dry through the winter. If you have any doubt about your roof will weather the winter, call Knox Roofing today and ask about a free rooftop inspection. We love it up here. 461-0634. Thanks, folks.
You need a clean, pleasant space to conduct business, but you don't want the burden of a long, expensive lease. Your solution is Satellite Co-working and Digital Media Studio on Soquel Avenue. Satellite offers private offices, meeting and conference rooms, even co-working by the hour, day, week, or month. Schedule a tour at satellitecoworking.com. Mention Santa Cruz Voice for 20% off your first reservation.
Get ready to help build one of America's first local news and talk streaming radio stations. SantaCruzVoice.com. How do you do it? By donating either your time, money, or both, you'll be helping the Voice team construct a powerful infrastructure, one that we can all be proud of. To donate your time, your money, or both, go to Santa Cruz Voice and click Support.
It's high time to celebrate the opening of the new Hook Outlet Dispensary, 1129 Mission in Santa Cruz. Get in on the opening fun and really low prices on the Hook's unmatched selection of top quality medical and recreational cannabis flower, vapes, drinks, gummies, and concentrates. The Hook Outlet is now the West Side's source for finest cannabis at the lowest prices. Get in on all the opening fun and low prices at the all-new Hook Outlet. HookOutlet.com for details and deals.
Okay, welcome back. At 11:37, our final segment begins. And once again, I feel it incumbent upon me to implore anybody who feels like making that phone call, do it. Great time. 831-265-5050. Yesterday, we carried the story that Congressman Jerry Nadler of New York is not running again. And I didn't really have a great deal to say about that because, you know, it's kind of like looking over the fence at the other side. I say, okay, here's this guy. He's been in Congress for 34 years. That's half his lifetime now. So he's 78, and he's stepping down. So where do you find interesting analysis for this? Well, since Congressman Nadler is very much on the left, let's look on the left and see what they have to say. Zishan Alim, writing on MSNBC. Democratic stalwart Jerry Nadler, the longest-serving New Yorker and Jewish member of the House, is retiring. Nadler's a 78-year-old liberal stalwart. He chaired the powerful House Judiciary Committee, during which he oversaw 2 impeachments of Donald Trump. Well, that's nothing to brag about, but I guess in certain cycles they might think it is. He can cite a long list of achievements. It seems he's retiring not because he feels he's done enough, because he feels he ought to make way for a younger generation. The New York Times reports that Nadler's decision was influenced by how former President Joe Biden's age was a problem while in office. So, essentially, Nadler said that, well, I looked at what happened with Biden. He wanted to stay past his sell-by date, and I don't want to do that. Watching the Biden thing said something about the necessity for generational change in the party. I want to respect that. Maybe a younger successor can do better, can maybe help us more. It's a striking comment. Many Democrats eventually agreed that Biden's age had been a problem, but that hasn't spurred a mass exodus of older lawmakers from the Democratic Party. More of Congress is 70 plus than ever. In the House, the Democratic Party has scores of members over 70, nearly double the amount that the Republicans do. 3 House Democrats have died this year. You know, this is nothing new. I remember back in 1994, how long ago? That's 30 years ago now. 30 years ago. And Republicans won a tremendous victory, took control of the House of Representatives for the first time in 40 years. And, of course, when you do that, all the committee chairmen suddenly, instead of Democrats, they're Republicans. And there were actually pieces in the news about the impact of this on ages. Republicans coming into power brought the median age of members down by several years. The median age of committee chairmen down by something like 15 or 18 years. Now, is this to say that Republicans are somehow younger than Democrats? No. I think it's something else. I think the answer, once again, can be looked at in where your top priority is. We've talked in recent programs about professional politicians. Just yesterday I was lambasting Kwame Nkrumah, a statesman from Ghana years ago. What did we learn about him? That all he ever did was politics. A lifetime of politics, nothing else. No other occupation, no other profession, just politics. Like Lenin, like Hitler, like Stalin, like Zoran Mamdani. Politics, nothing else interests these people. Republicans tend not to be that way. And that's what leads to your reduction in age, is because Republicans will spend a career in insurance or business or real estate or plumbing or whatever the hell. And they might, after they've done that, devote some time to public service. There was one guy, for something like 25 years, he worked in the entertainment industry. First in radio, then motion pictures, finally television. And when he got into his mid to late 50s and, was pretty much his entertainment career was over, he went into politics and presently was elected governor of California and later president of the United States. But he wasn't a professional politician and never saw himself as one. The Gerald Nadlers of this world live, breathe, eat, drink, and sleep politics. And this is why they stay and stay and stay. This is why Nancy Pelosi is nearing 90 years old and is still there. They have no other life. Sounds bizarre, but it is absolutely true. This explains, I think, why the Democrats have this geriatric problem far more than we Republicans do. It's possible Nadler's decision to call it quits was influenced by the wariness of an unusually competitive primary season. Despite his seniority, Nadler was bound to face a robust primary challenger. I don't know about that. Nadler's acknowledgement of the age problem and its potential to stymie a need for change within the party is laudable, all the same. Once again, these are the words of Zishan Alim, certified left-winger. Well, that's essentially all he has to say about this. This is just a couple of short paragraphs. So there's no deep analysis here. I'm disappointed. I was hoping there would be. But in this particular case, you have a Democratic leftist analyst saying, well, so here we have at least one geriatric deciding to leave under his own steam. I wonder how many of them will do that. Certainly Charles Schumer doesn't seem like he's going to. And again, if you shifted control to the Republicans, you would see a significant decline in ages. Looks like Mike is on the line. I am really glad about that. Let's find out. Well, he wants to talk about two things that I've discussed in this hour: women callers and unions. Let's find out what he thinks. Hi, Mike.
Hey, good morning, or end of the morning to you, Mr. Freedman.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, there was a little break. I had to get off the air for. I stopped listening to you for about 15, 20 minutes. But I wanted to call in when you first mentioned the female callers, and then you kind of went into the unions, which I have some thoughts about. As to female callers, I know that, back in the 60s with feminism and everything, we're supposed to believe that we're all equal. And I think finally, society's starting to get a little common sense. And even women who identify as progressive or liberal are starting to kind of get that, no, we're not the same. And I work in a predominantly female field. I work in healthcare, I work in a hospital.
Mm-hmm.
And again, this is purely anecdotal, because some of the best people that I argue politics with, or they have knowledge far greater than me, are women. But when I was raising my kids and I talk about the differences between groups, I always qualify it with, this isn't universal across the board. It might be 60-40, it might be 80-20, it might be 90-10, and I just happen to have found that through 38, 40 plus years of working with predominantly women, they don't seem as interested in politics as men do, in general. I used to be a regular caller to KGO, to a couple of their, primarily Ron Owens, but also some of the afternoon or the evening hosts. And even back then, the predominant people calling in were men. And so I just think that tends to be a trend. When we're on the unit where I work, the guys tend to get together and we discuss politics and culture issues and sports and history. And the women discuss reality television, their families, and things like that. So I think that might be one reason you don't get any or as many female callers. I just kind of think it's the difference between us in our interests, which is also one of the reasons we finally learned that there is a gender wage gap. It really isn't that corporate America is saying, a woman CEO, not on my watch. It's that women tend to gravitate towards lower paying fields because they want the enjoyment of the work more so than men. So that said, that's just, my opinion as to why you may not be getting as many. Then the other thing with unions, I have a complete love-hate relationship with unions. On one hand, I do think in their place, I agree with everything you said. There was a time when unions were absolutely necessary. And I do think that the unions were a large reason, not the only reason, but a large reason, we had a middle class. My family's an example of that. My mom was a Harry Bridges longshoreman. My mom was a Teamster business agent. She worked with the Teamsters for years. That said, they jumped the shark. They went a little bit too far. We know that, and that was ultimately the death of the unions. I'm a member of the union now, and I see them as the lesser of two evils. I know if I didn't have those union protections, I wouldn't have the wage I have right now, and I live a good middle-class life. I am very well paid, and I put that money back into the economy, and that's my defense of the unions. On the other hand, I hold my nose every month when I pay my dues because the union I'm a member of is the admin is so leftist. They are out and out socialists, and unfortunately, they've gotten away. And I think this is the downside to a lot of unions. They've gotten away from just protecting the membership, and they've gotten into. I know damn well most of my money goes to politics, and the vast majority of the politics, my union, which is the California Nurses Union, the vast majority of the politics they support, I don't. I do think they do some good things with healthcare laws in the state of California. It's one of the things that makes it a good state to work in as a nurse. But all the other stuff, immigration, gun control, all of that, I am so against what they support. But I still have to pay my union dues because I have a little bit more trust in the union taking care of me than the management of the for-profit hospital that I work for. What are your thoughts?
Fascinating presentations. I'm very interested in hearing. Of course, the first thing I heard you say that your dad was a Harry Bridges longshoreman. Unlike most American labor leaders, Harry Bridges was a communist, and he was a communist.
Absolutely.
He was a communist back in the days when that meant you were a follower of and obedient to Joseph Stalin. This is something that most people don't understand nowadays. Oh, you're a communist. It doesn't mean the same thing today as it did 50 years ago or 60 years ago. Literally, being a communist in those days meant you were beholden to a foreign agency. And, at the time, Bridges always was very coy. Bridges, was not an American. He was an Australian. And he came here, I don't know whether he ever became a naturalized citizen or not, but he was a legal resident. But his political ties became subject to question occasionally, and he always denied he was a communist. Well, when the Soviet Union finally fell apart and the Venona papers became available for examination, one of the questions that was that, hey, was Alger Hiss really a communist? Was Harry Bridges really a communist? And so we finally found out years later. And the answer in Bridges' case was yes, absolutely. He was a member of the Central Committee of the Communist Party of the United States. So,
yes.
This particular union was a particular odious one because of the radicalism of its leader. But during the course of your presentation, unions eventually went too far. I assume you mean that, like in the case of the longshoremen today, they are fighting tooth and nail against modernization of our port facilities, which are by international standards.
Yeah, the longshoremen, but...
Go ahead.
Right, and I was mainly thinking of the Teamsters when I said that.
Oh, well, that was Mom.
Yes. But I mean, just in terms of the unions kind of going a little bit too far and overdoing it.
Well, Teamsters also, you set up these union rules that hamstring production and productivity. The UAW actually had...
Oh, absolutely.
The UAW actually had it so, you had to keep these workers on the payroll. They had nothing to do, so you had to maintain a room with soft and ping pong tables and card tables, go and sit and waste time while they were still drawing union wages. This is crazy.
Oh, well, let me interject really quick. My own personal experience with that. When I got out of the Navy, I worked out of the Teamster Hiring Hall, 287 in San Jose. And I can remember going onto job sites. I can remember working in warehouses where guys would say, "Hey, kid, slow it down a little bit, okay?" Because you work hard, an incredibly hard worker. He also left the longshoremen, and he ended up working for the city and county of San Francisco for 25 years. But, yeah, I can remember people telling me to kind of just, slow it down. And so I've always known that's the downside of unions. And even my mom, who was a business agent, would say that. My mom was very good at saying, she'd have to go in and defend guys. She didn't want to defend. She knew they were lazy. And she would just say, but this is on management. It does due diligence, and they keep records, and they keep the paperwork going. It will be get rid of somebody. Would always use USPS as an example, that they had just stringent rules. And if a guy came in and he didn't have a haircut or, his shoes weren't shined, they'd write him up time and time again, and it was very easy to get rid of the dead wood that way. So she put that on management largely, and I tend to agree.
Yeah, if I can understand that's a function of effective management if you're interested in the phrase is called documenting out the door.
You there, Mr. Freedman?
Yeah, I was wondering if you'd comment on that, but okay, fine.
Oh, no, you broke up right as you said that. I didn't hear your question.
Oh, I said it's documenting out the door.
Yes. Yeah, and even to this day, I mean, if you don't have effective managers, you are going to get stuck with that dead wood. I see that all the time, but, there's a good and bad to everything. But go on with what you were saying.
Certainly true, but in the public sector, most unionized workers today are in the public sector. This is something else that's changed dramatically over the years since we were young. I made the point that unionization hit its peak in the 50s, 35% of the workforce, but it was all private sector. Today, something like 8% of workers are unionized. The percentage in the public sector is up in the 30s. And so
yeah, horrendous.
Unionism has now gone into the public sector. And there are reasons for this, but one of the main ones, I think, is because in the public sector, unions find it possible to have their cake and eat it too. They can participate in political activity, enabling them to elect officials who sit on the management side of the table. And then there they are sitting on the labor side of the table. So essentially, public sector unions wind up controlling both sides of the table. And this, incidentally, is why Franklin Delano Roosevelt made the point years ago that unionization was not suitable in the public sector. That began to crack in the 50s and 60s. And I can remember when I was a kid, just after I graduated high school, my local high school faculty here, all the teachers, Powder Valley Unified School District, went out on strike, and I was thinking, what in the hell is all that about? School teachers don't strike.
Yeah.
But welcome to the brave new world of public.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's funny when I have slightly more left-leaning friends who kind of will go on, or in debate sites online or whatever, who will go on about, curbing the lobbyists, corporate lobbyists in Washington, which I agree with wholeheartedly, but they always freeze when I suggest, okay, how about public sector union, how about union lobbyists, how about, and it's like, no, well, they're doing good, they're doing bad.
Right, exactly. These are the same people who will excoriate people like me for you say that corporations are people. Well, they say that labor unions are people. They say that political are people. I simply say organizations formed by and made up of human beings are composed of people and deserve to be treated as such. But there are those who would accord entirely different treatment to corporations and to lawyers simply because they regard one as morally superior to the other. Nonsense. These are opposing forces in a tug of war between interests.
Yes. No, I wholeheartedly agree with that.
You're still a union member, and you said you find it bittersweet. You hate paying the dues. Are the dues onerous or are they nominal?
Depends on your perspective. I mean, I think my dues are over 150, approaching 100. They're really good. So I can't really, it's not as much that I'm paying the dues. It's not the price of the dues that bothers me as much as what I know they're being spent on.
Where the money goes. Yeah, you're essentially spending money
right.
to frustrate your own goals. Listen.
I mean, I would gladly. Oh, okay, yeah, it's time.
We're out of time, but we're starting to say, well, I would gladly. You got 40 seconds. Go ahead.
I'd gladly pay double my dues if they would just stay out of politics than to pay half of my dues knowing that it's going. That's all.
Pleasure to hear from you today. Appreciate you taking the time. Have a great day.
All right, you take care, Mr. Freedman. Bye-bye.
That does it for today. I am so glad, grateful for the people who called in. I wonder if Mike's right about I don't think that, there are plenty of women who are interested in politics. I think that they just tend to be less likely to take the step of picking up a telephone for one reason or another. I don't know. Not being one, I can't speak for them. It is noon at Santa Cruz Voice. I'll see you again tomorrow at 9:06.